sei qui con me. Questa stanza non ha più pareti, ma alberi.
I'm going to share a little bit about some of the work that we do at my company, mainly in Denmark, but also internationally. So we're talking about reimagining education. We're talking about maybe having a blank slate and rethinking what it is that we're doing, and doing so in partnership with our students, are like the young people who are our colleagues in trying to change things. And I'm going to today provide a perspective from the more sort of the physical environments that we are also always part of or in, and how that can make a difference. And I'll just skip through some of the slides so that you can have lunch later. And so first of all, we're talking about what is learning and what is a great educational experience, because we want children and young people today to be engaged with their lives, their futures, their communities, and we want to enable them to live lives worth living, not just for the future, for the economy of our countries, but for their lives, for their families, for their communities, and not just for the future, but also today. That we provide educational experiences and schools, or whatever we call it, that are really, worth their time and lives and worth their efforts. So, and I have a particular interest in also the physical environment. So, and when we talk about that, it's not about the physical environment. It's about our philosophies, about what we think learning is and what the experience of a student should be. And it's about how we organize learning, because it's, rethinking time. But there's so much that we can do differently. Nobody said a school has to be a lot of lessons on top of each other. It doesn't have to start at 8 or 9. Like, there's so many things that we get to decide them, actually. So let's take advantage of that. And the physical design of, for instance, a school or a learning space, to me, it's a consequence of how we think, and it helps communicate that, and it helps enable that experience for young people. So we see learning spaces as a narrative that communicates a whole lot to you, as it does when we walk into such a beautiful room like this. And also all sorts of other spaces like this. So how do you make a child feel when they walk into your school or your classrooms? What does it feel like to be a child there? And what are you communicating about what you want learning to be? And also, it's also from a very practical perspective, it's a didactic or pedagogical tool. There are things you can do in a space that is set up like this, and there are things you can do in other types of spaces that you are encouraged to do. So we can use it also as a very intentional vehicle for transformation, being intentional about how we design our spaces. And I love the question yesterday, what do we do in the classrooms that we have with, can we do things? And I hope to also provide an answer for that during my presentation. And I just want to show you a little, it's just what you call like a little speed thing here, just showing a traditional classroom and what could be done also. And just to show that spaces are not what we have, it's what we make of them. So that we are intentional about that. Some of the questions that we ask ourselves when we co-design, I was going to say we do not design learning spaces, but we help students and teachers design their spaces to the way they think and the way they want learning to feel and look like. So some of the great questions that we always want to address is how do we support learning and participation for every child every day? How do we create those environments? And how do we nurture motivation and a sense of purpose? And just like walk into your classrooms and ask yourself those questions. Does it nurture your motivation? Does it nurture your sense of purpose? And what can you do to make it even more so? And how do we encourage what we could call 21st century skills, or collaboration and communication and creativity and all of that? How are the spaces inviting us to do such things and to become really good at it and flex our creative muscles? And not least, and I think most importantly, how do we nurture relationships? How do we help children build friendships at school? Because school is not just what happens during lessons, it is as much what happens between lessons, in the break. It's what happens after school. It's so much. You addressed it too, Guy. And so we need to think about that. Look at the school not just from how can we create efficient learning here? No, how do we nurture lives of curiosity, growth, friendships, relationships, spaces where we feel safe, where we feel at home, where we feel this is for us. It's not just somebody else's project. This is actually about me and my friends here and the whole community. So I think those are some good questions to address, and not least some of the things that we think we always want to encourage people to think about in their learning spaces. How can we create or have the students create a sense of belonging here so they feel it's their space? How can every student feel that they are able to contribute? And how can every student have a sense of choice or autonomy, that they are able to do things? Because you know what? Children are not able to quit their jobs as students. As adults, we can make up our minds and say, hey, this is not for me, or it's not working. I don't feel like healthy and it's not for me. We can decide to do something differently. Children can't. And that's a huge obligation. And we need to think about that in the pedagogies and the whole system we set up, in the relationships and also the spaces. And children bring their bodies to school every day, and it gets a lot of kids in trouble every day, that they move around or they cannot sit still. So how can we also build that into whatever environment we invite them into? And how can we create meaningful and joyful and engaging experiences where you can use your hands, you can use your mind, and not everybody has to do the same thing at the same time? And how do we, again, nurture those relationships that are so important? How do we nurture positive emotions? Because if we can get that right, every child or most children will feel invited, and then you can begin, you connect, you begin learning, and you can explore together. So what does the future of schools look like, the future of education? And we've heard so many wonderful examples here. And I have some of my most amazing friends here in the who they have inspired me so much in what I do. So if schools are maybe about curiosity and big questions and reimagining not just education, but it's about reimagining the world we share locally, globally. So what would that look like when we open the door to a classroom if there's a wall and a door? I live in a country where we need a little bit of, I live in Denmark, and so it's too cold to not have at least some kind of walls around the building. But what does that look like? Because a lot of schools talk about how we can create a sense of, or how do we educate compassionate global citizens here who really thrive and enjoy learning. And I'm just going to open a classroom door and see what does that look like. So these are places, this is in my country. These are the places where we invite kids in and hope that they'll flourish, develop friendships that'll last for life, where they can grow their creativity and explore what the world could look like. And so back to those initial questions, this is motivating, what's the sense of purpose, all of that. What is communicated to you as a child when you walk in? I was having this discussion with the student council one day. I just showed them this picture and I said, what do you see? And what do you feel? And then this boy put his hand up and he said, that looks like the longest day ever. Yeah, and it's kind of true. So what we're doing, when we create spaces, design spaces, we are creating learning cultures. We do that through the pedagogy, the way we relate to each other, and we do it through spaces too, because they communicate very strongly to us. And this is a model, it's Edgar Schein on organizational culture, and we use that quite a lot in education, because what we talk about is how we develop learning cultures that are really engaging. So the first layer, it's the artifacts. What do you see when you walk in? Sit down, look one way, and the teacher will have all the answers and only speak so there's an expected set of norms or behaviors. So don't speak. And for God's sake, sit still and do that maybe throughout the day. And underneath that, if the system works well, there are some basic assumptions about learning. And here it must be that we all learn in the same way and need the same things at the same time. And this is beneficial to everybody. But I've never met a teacher in my life who thinks like this. So the question is, how do we shape our learning spaces and our schools and the whole ecosystems of learning where the kids are around what we truly believe to be true about learning and growth in life today? So here are some other spaces. So spaces do communicate, and it's a whole different message you send to kids here, a message of choice, a message of it can be comfortable. You can sit on a comfortable couch reading if you want to, or you can do this, or you can do that. You can do it with your friends, but you can be engaged, and it's okay if you disengage for a little while and then you come back, because we all do that. Or at least I do when I'm working. Sometimes you take that little break and you decide when. And here also a playful learning environment with lots of different things, places you can go. And this one, you guys know this. This is, I think, the wildest classroom I've ever seen. It's at High Tech High in San Diego, and here you're clearly invited to make things. You're invited to experiment, and you're invited to be wrong about what you're doing. It might not work, but have a go at it and exhibit it and try it out and collaborate and just bring your ideas and see where you can take it. So it's all about those. It's not hidden messages we have in our spaces. They are very, very clear, and they communicate very strongly to us. Yeah. So what I'm just taking it a little back to more ordinary classrooms. So what we're seeing is a development, like a changing landscape of learning that we are creating, that is happening across the world. So going from a traditional classroom to a more collaborative model, and then opening the door and not everybody doing the same thing at the same time. We're doing things that matter to us. We collaborate with different, it could be other students, it could be teachers, it could be professionals from close by, and also all the world around us. Use nature, use the cities you are in, because it's all there. It's all great learning spaces, and even better than what we can create inside school. So I'm just gonna walk you through two projects that we have been part of. One is a new school that we've been helping shape, and another project is it's a school that changed, they didn't rebuild or anything, they just changed what was inside the classrooms. And the important thing here is that you create it with students, with teachers, because it's back to spaces being a very important part of the learning culture. It's something that we need to develop together, because we are rewiring the way we work together, the way we collaborate, the way we shape learning. So everybody needs to get involved. So we always start with discussing philosophy, learning, the vision, and then we try to get a lot of inspiration in, and then begin to prototype together. And we have everybody around the table. And it takes a while, but actually, after having been doing this work for some years, it ended up that mostly worked with teachers in Denmark. When we got around to talking about what did they want if we were rebuilding or building a new school, it always came back to classrooms because like they like to stay on the safe side of things. So we could talk about the most fabulous learning ever, and they'd be so courageous and wanting to do all sorts of things. And now let's talk about spaces. Yeah. Could we just get those classrooms? So there's such a big gap between what we talked about and what they, thought they wanted. So we thought about how could we bridge that? How can we bridge present and future, and that dream space, Dave, that you talk about in between that we find ourselves in? How do we navigate that? And also, how do we help teachers and architects communicate, because they speak two very different languages? So what we did was not really difficult when you think of it. It's like you bring some inspiration in, and what we do, what we know works in learning. You do things, you create things. So we created something we call the Learning Space Design Lab, and it might seem a little silly at first because we build it's dolls' houses, kind of. So we might build an entire school in little models, and then we have these furniture pieces. And so instead of having a room that looks like this, like no teachers ever, when we do this, they never want a classroom, because nobody's going to build something like this when they can get that, or even something else. So we use it to prototype new spaces. We use it to begin to sort of ignite that conversation around the learning culture and help the organization rewire how they think, how they work. So I'm just going to show you from a school that we worked with. Instead of classrooms, they came up, they wanted spaces that looked like this. So these are sort of, what could you call it, like learning villages, learning hubs for 70 kids at a time. So it had that homey feeling. Everybody would know each other. And this is what it's not the entire school, but these are the elements of the learning hubs that was then created. So 70, 80 kids would share this space with their team of teachers who would know them really well. So larger spaces, smaller spaces, and a very good indoor-outdoor connection. I'm going to show you what it ended up looking like. And there's a little video here. And if you notice, the most important piece is that we have teams collaborating, negotiating, talking about what learning is like here. And then they actually get what they built, more or less. So this is one of the learning hubs. So they can all get together on the staircase behind that. Lots of little places where they can sit and work or relax. We don't distinguish between formal and informal spaces here. It's all there to be used in ways the students want to use them. And yeah, a little bit more. This is one of the rooms there, very popular room. And in each learning hub, they also decided to have something that looked like a classroom, but that is actually the space they use the least. So it's about how can we build those relationships? How can we nurture friendships? How can we enable kids to make choices and find focus and yeah, just be a very helpful place for them every day. Here's another example. I'll just go one step back. This is a school that they were not rebuilding as such, but they wanted to say, how can we change our existing classrooms? And this is what we work with 60 students and 60 teachers to build principles for learning spaces. And this is what they came up with. So you do see the classrooms there, but they have very many different options to go and work or to collaborate. So it's a very collaborative model, really. And what we found that it really reduced, we got students back who had a lot of absence from school. The noise levels were reduced. Level of conflict was also reduced because it was just a different place. And you get to know yourself as a learner when you make choices, and you have that negotiation also with your teacher maybe about how you learn well. So it's it's super fun work to really get the kids in and the teachers in and have them create things from scratch and really begin to rethink what spaces could look like. I'll just show you some of the key trends from, like, we work with thousands of teachers and kids. So they want variety, they want choice, they want it to be colorful and inviting so that it looks like a space for kids and not just for adults where it's like black and white and several shades of gray. A lot of little spaces where you can collaborate. So working in smaller groups, how you can accommodate that and how you can also have other choices of spaces where you can work. It's nooks, it's caves, like you cannot get enough little nooks in a school. You need those cracks in the building where kids can go and just be or hide for a little bit or just find that place that is really quiet because they cannot go to the staff room either. They cannot quit, they cannot go to the staff room. So they need those little places. And it's quite easy to shape. You can just move a cupboard a little like out from the wall and then you have a little space and you'd find a group of kids sitting there in no time. So there are so many ways to do it. And also if we can incorporate and allow physical movement to some extent, indoors, outdoors, it's really helpful for all of us that we are able to move. And not least, here's a picture from High Tech High. We need to exhibit the work that kids are doing. We need to really also build that sense of pride and like we use it for something and it inspires us every day. And we can see when we walk in what is going on and what is important right now and what are those conversations that we can have. And really important, something that we've seen over the past 5 years, this nature, sense of nature, organic shapes, grass, trees, indoors, outdoors. It's so important to well-being. It's so important to our nervous systems. So that is something that we see really growing in schools and not least create the spaces together. And then I'm from Denmark. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of hygge, but I think it goes to talk about, formal and informal spaces. There's no reason why spaces can't feel what we call hyggelig or cozy, comfortable, very human. So I think there's one other picture. I'll skip to it and just show you also another school here. Oh, yeah, this one. It can be very simple. It doesn't have to be expensive. This is a little a solo space that a kid created. So it's just sometimes simple to create and reimagine your spaces with your kids because there's so much we can do. We always have a choice. We can do so many things. Like Amna said yesterday, it just takes that little thing sometimes to change a whole experience. So with that, I'll close and thank you so much for having me here.
Questa stanza non ha più